You miss someone who nearly destroyed you. Someone who lied, manipulated, and broke your heart into pieces. Yet late at night, you find yourself longing for them, wondering if you made a mistake. Carl Jung discovered why this psychological torture happens over 100 years ago, and what he found reveals the hidden addiction that keeps you trapped. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your mind betrays you this way, and more importantly, how to break free from this emotional prison. Maybe you're lying awake at 3 a.m., replaying memories of someone who systematically tore down your self-worth. Perhaps you're scrolling through their social media, torturing yourself with glimpses of their new life. Or you might be asking yourself that devastating question, how can I miss someone who hurt me so badly? This isn't weakness, and you're not broken. Millions of survivors of narcissistic abuse experience this same psychological contradiction. Modern therapy often treats this as trauma bonding or codependency, but these explanations barely scratch the surface of what's really happening in your psyche. But what if I told you that Carl Jung mapped this exact psychological territory decades before the term narcissistic abuse existed? His insights don't just explain why you're trapped in this emotional hell, they provide the key to your psychological freedom. Carl Gustav Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist who founded analytical psychology. But what made him revolutionary wasn't just his break from Freud. It was his insight into the shadow aspects of human nature and the unconscious forces that drive our most self-destructive behaviors. Jung understood that our psyche contains elements we desperately try to avoid, yet paradoxically, we're drawn to them like moths to flame. In the early 1900s, Jung observed that his patients repeatedly attracted the same toxic dynamics into their lives. He saw that we unconsciously seek out relationships that mirror our unresolved psychological material, not despite the pain they cause, but because of it. What modern psychology calls repetition compulsion, Jung understood as the psyche's attempt to heal itself through reenactment. Today, we recognize this as the psychological mechanism behind trauma bonding with narcissists. But Jung's approach goes far deeper than contemporary therapy because he understood that missing your abuser isn't a symptom to eliminate. It's your psyche's desperate attempt to reclaim the parts of yourself you lost in the relationship. I know this is getting deep already. Let me give you a moment to process this. Pause, gentle tone. What Jung discovered about the human psyche is profound, and it's going to challenge everything you thought you knew about your relationship with the narcissist. Are you ready for the first revelation? Jung's first crucial insight was shadow projection. Now, I know this sounds academic, but imagine for a moment that your psyche is like a house. The shadow represents all the furniture, all the qualities, all the parts of yourself that you've locked away in the basement because you didn't like them or were told they were bad. Here's what the narcissist did. They didn't just find the key to your basement. They furnished their entire house with your hidden furniture. And you fell in love with their house, never realizing you were simply missing what was yours all along. Jung discovered that we unconsciously project our disowned qualities onto others. If you're highly empathetic, you might be unconsciously fascinated by someone who appears completely self-centered. If you struggle with setting boundaries, you might be drawn to someone who has no boundaries at all. The narcissist doesn't just abuse you, they embody the shadow qualities you've rejected in yourself. But here's where it gets psychologically complex. When they love-bombed you, they weren't just manipulating you, they were reflecting back your own capacity for intensity, passion, and aliveness that you'd learned to suppress. When they withdrew, you weren't just losing them. You were losing access to those disowned parts of yourself. Think about it this way. If someone took all your favorite belongings and then slowly started removing them from your view, wouldn't you desperately want them back? That's what's happening psychologically. Modern neuroscience confirms Jung's insights about unconscious attraction. Dr. Helen Fisher's research on brain chemistry shows that intermittent reinforcement, the hot and cold behavior narcissists specialize in, literally creates the same neural pathways as cocaine addiction. But Jung went deeper. He understood that you're not addicted to them. You're addicted to the disowned aspects of yourself they temporarily allowed you to experience. So we see how shadow projection explains the initial unconscious attraction. But Jung identified an even more disturbing dynamic: the anima and animus complexes. This reveals why you mistake their manipulation for love, and why breaking free feels like losing your soul. To pause for breath. Okay, I need you to stay with me here because what I'm about to share might be difficult to accept, but it's the key to your freedom. Jung's concept of anima and animus explains something that might shock you. It's very likely that you never actually loved the narcissist themselves. You fell deeply in love with your own projection of your unconscious ideal, and they intuitively knew how to manipulate this projection to create a psychological prison. Think of it like this. Imagine you're a puzzle with missing pieces. For men, the anima represents those missing pieces related to creativity, emotion, and spiritual connection. For women, the animus represents the missing pieces of direction, strength, and assertiveness. Narcissists are like master puzzle detectives. They can sense exactly which pieces you're missing. Here's their psychological strategy. They present themselves as the perfect missing puzzle piece. If you're a woman who struggles with asserting yourself, they appear incredibly decisive and powerful. If you're a man disconnected from his emotions, they seem deeply intuitive and emotionally available. But here's the catch. They're not actually your missing piece. They're just showing you a reflection of what you need to develop within yourself. What feels like incredible chemistry is actually your psyche recognizing its missing pieces in another person. What feels like soulmate connection is projection. What feels like losing your other half when they discard you is actually losing access to your own disowned psychological functions. Jung called this unconscious identity. You literally cannot tell where you end and they begin. Attachment researchers now understand this as fantasy bonding. You bond with your projection of them, not their actual self. But Jung's insight was revolutionary. He realized that healing requires withdrawing these projections and developing your anima or animus consciously. This is why you miss them. You haven't yet reclaimed these aspects of yourself. But Jung discovered something even more crucial about why the abuse felt so addictive. Reflective pause. This next part explains the most heartbreaking aspect of narcissistic abuse. Take a deep breath because understanding this will change everything. Jung's third insight explains the most disturbing aspect of narcissistic abuse, why it felt simultaneously destructive and addictive. He discovered that trauma creates complexes, autonomous psychological patterns that operate outside conscious control. The narcissist didn't just abuse you. They activated and fed off your existing complexes. Jung observed that we all carry complexes from childhood, patterns formed around unresolved emotional wounds. Maybe you have a worthiness complex from early neglect, or an abandonment complex from inconsistent parenting. These complexes lie dormant until someone knows exactly how to activate them. Narcissists are complex detectors. They unconsciously identify your psychological wounds and create situations that constantly trigger these complexes. When they love bomb you, they temporarily soothe your worthiness complex. When they withdraw, they deliberately trigger your abandonment complex. This creates a psychological addiction cycle that has nothing to do with love and everything to do with complex activation. Here's the devastating truth that's hard to accept. You don't miss them. You miss the brief moments when your complexes felt soothed. You became addicted to the temporary relief from your own psychological pain, and they became your drug dealer. Jung understood that the psyche compulsively recreates childhood trauma in adult relationships, hoping to finally resolve it. If you experienced emotional neglect as a child, you'll unconsciously seek partners who neglect you emotionally. If you experience conditional love, you'll be drawn to people who make their love contingent on your behavior. The narcissist provides the perfect stage for your trauma repetition compulsion to play out. This is why traditional advice like just move on or focus on their flaws doesn't work. You're not missing a person. You're missing the complex relief they provided and the disowned parts of yourself they temporarily reflected. But here's where Jung's wisdom becomes your salvation. Individuation. This process doesn't just help you get over them, it helps you reclaim yourself completely. hopeful, encouraging pause. Now, I know this has been a lot to take in. Jung's insights can feel overwhelming at first because they're so much deeper than what we usually hear about relationships. But this depth is exactly what's going to set you free. Are you ready to learn how? Jung's process of individuation is the antidote to narcissistic abuse addiction. But it's not about healing or moving on in the traditional sense. It's about becoming psychologically whole. When you integrate your shadow, reclaim your anima or animus, and heal your complexes, missing them becomes psychologically impossible. Individuation involves 4 crucial steps. First, recognizing your shadow projections, the qualities you admired or hated in them that actually belong to you. Second, withdrawing your anima or animus projections and developing these aspects within yourself. Third, healing the complexes they activated through conscious awareness and integration. Fourth, developing your authentic self rather than seeking completion through others. This isn't therapy, it's psychological alchemy. You're not trying to get over the narcissist. You're transmuting the lead of your traumatic experience into the gold of psychological wisdom. When you complete this process, something remarkable happens. You stop missing them because you've become whole within yourself. The addiction breaks because you've reclaimed your own psychological functions. You're no longer seeking completion through another person because you've found it within yourself. But how do you actually begin this process? Jung provided specific practices, and I'm going to share 3 that you can start today. Now that you understand Jung's framework for why you miss someone who destroyed you, let's talk about how to actually break this emotional addiction. Jung would suggest 3 specific practices that transform psychological insight into lived freedom. Step 1. Daily shadow reclamation. Every morning, ask yourself, what quality did I admire in them that I've disowned in myself? Then, take one tiny action to develop that quality. If you admired their decisiveness, your shadow work today might be choosing what movie you and your friend watch tonight, even if you feel uncomfortable making the choice. If you were drawn to their apparent confidence in social situations, practice making one genuine compliment to a stranger at the coffee shop. The key is to start small and specific. Don't try to transform your entire personality overnight. Just reclaim one shadow quality per day through micro-actions. Step 2. Inner union practice. Identify which psychological function you projected onto them. If you're a woman who projected your animus, your inner masculine energy of direction and assertiveness, create a daily practice of making one decision without seeking anyone's approval. This week, that might mean opening Google Maps, finding a cafe in a neighborhood you've never been to, and going there alone this weekend. Just decide and go. If you're a man who projected your anima, your inner feminine energy of creativity and emotional depth, commit to 15 minutes daily of creative expression. Write 3 sentences in a journal about how you're feeling, or hum a melody while you're cooking. The goal isn't to create anything good. It's to reconnect with that part of yourself. Step 3. Complex dialogue. Practice. When you feel the overwhelming urge to contact them, or when missing them feels unbearable, practice Jung's active imagination. Sit quietly and have a conscious dialogue with the part of you that misses them. Ask, what do you need right now? Often, you'll discover you're not missing them. You're missing feeling worthy, or feeling emotionally alive, or feeling protected. Then ask, how can I provide this for myself right now? If you're missing feeling worthy, you might call a friend who appreciates you. If you're missing feeling alive, you might put on music and dance in your living room for 5 minutes. Implementation timeline. Start today by identifying one quality you miss about them. This week, practice developing that quality within yourself through one small daily action. Over the next month, establish a daily relationship with your own psyche rather than seeking completion through others. Grounding, summarizing tone. Let's take a moment to integrate what we've discovered together. So what did Jung teach us about missing someone who destroyed you? 3 life-changing insights. First, you're not missing them. you're missing the disowned parts of yourself they temporarily reflected back to you. Second, what felt like love was actually complex activation and projection addiction, a psychological dependency, not authentic connection. And most importantly, healing isn't about getting over them. It's about becoming psychologically whole within yourself. This is why Jung's approach succeeds where conventional therapy often falls short. While psychology treats trauma bonding as a symptom to eliminate, Jungian analysis reveals it as your psyche's attempt to individuate through relationship. While therapy focuses on healing from abuse, philosophical psychology shows you how to transform abuse into wisdom. You're not a victim recovering, you're a whole person emerging. When you apply Jung's insights to narcissistic abuse recovery, you don't just break the trauma bond. You become immune to future manipulation because you're no longer seeking completion through others. You move from psychological fragmentation to authentic wholeness. The person who could be destroyed by a narcissist no longer exists because you've individuated beyond their reach. If Jung's insights into narcissistic abuse addiction resonated with you, you're joining thousands of people who are discovering that philosophy heals what psychology can't cure. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to join our community of philosophical healers who refuse to remain victims of their own unconscious patterns. For more on breaking trauma bonds, watch my video, How to Stop Being Addicted to Toxic People, Stoic Philosophy Reveals. And if you're struggling with setting boundaries with narcissists, check out The Shadow Work Guide to Unshakable Boundaries, Jung's Method. Your individuation journey requires multiple perspectives. Tell me in the comments, which of Jung's insights hit you the hardest? Shadow projection, animus manipulation, or complex activation? And what aspect of individuation would you like me to explore next? Your psychological freedom journey is just beginning, and philosophy will be your guide.